How is it going, everyone? Hope your day is going great. I welcome you to another episode of Forward Thinking Founders. Before we get into today's episode, I had a quick question for you. If you're listening, have you ever been an investor anymore? Have you ever put money into an entity and with an expectation of a return? Some of you, not all of you. Well, now is your chance. You can be an angel investor in Forward Thinking Founders, the podcast. And no, you don't got to be an accredited investor. All you need is $10 a month or $100 a year. Now, what does this get you? What's your ROI? Well, it gets you a ton. First of all, you don't have to listen to me pitch you this every single episode, so you bypass all ads and all future sponsorships. You get premium content as you get the full episode of every single episode that comes out, as many of them are kind of blocked halfway through. You get access to our online community where you get to see access to the episodes sometimes days before or weeks before they hit the internet. And lastly, you get access to our in-person meetups, which we are having the first one in San Francisco in late January. So if all of that sounds groovy, and you want to help out a fellow creator, which is me, and help me kind of invest into this podcast to make it better, then please become an angel investor in Forward Thinking Founders. How do you do it? You can find our terms and our sheet and all of our documentation at glow.fm/F20R. That's glow.fm/F20R. It is best done on mobile, and I look forward to having you as a supporter. Now let's get into today's episode. Run it! All right, how is it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Forward Thinking Founders, where we're talking to founders about their companies, their visions for the future, and how the two collide. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to Zack Brown, the creator of Haiku. Zack, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Thanks, Matt. It's going fine. Another Monday in paradise.
Another Monday in paradise. Absolutely. Well, I am very excited to learn more about what you're working on, and I know that everyone listening is as well. So with that, let's just dive right into it. Can you tell us a little more about Haiku?
Sure. I'll start with our mission. Haiku's mission is to revolutionize the way that teams create software by unifying design and code. Or in other words, we create collaboration tools for creators of software. And I'm curious, a question for you, Matt. What does that mean to you, creators of software? Who is that?
Well, if you asked me 2 years ago, I would say it's people who are in, Node.js or React, and they're building these complex apps that we all use. We're using Zoom now. That's a complex app. I think that's what I think of software. But more recently, I don't have a fully fleshed out definition, because this tool is being built, like no-code tools that are allowing a lot of people to build basic apps, not super complex, but basic apps. So I don't have a great answer other than it's TBD, but definitely people that build complex apps. But I think within a few years, even most people will be able to build basic apps, which I think might qualify as software builders.
So yeah, I think the low code, no code sort of movements are worth digging into a bit. At least for a framework for speaking of creators of software. For me, it helps to think of creating software like creating a building, like the things that you and I are each respectively sitting in. And the most obvious creator of a building is the construction worker, the man or the woman with the hammer and the nails and the saw. But creating buildings really is a larger team effort. You've got real estate developers and investors. You've got engineers across electrical, structural, and HVAC. You've got construction managers, even interior designers, landscape architects, lawyers, and accountants. All of these people come together as a team, and what comes out the other side is a building. Now, software is exactly the same way. So you've got your software engineers, the folks who are writing Node and React and Objective-C, Swift, Java, etc. that's the most obvious answer to who creates software. But the broader term includes a ton of other specialists like visual designers, UX designers, product managers, marketers, branding folks. So that's what we mean when we say collaboration tools, connecting creators of software, is bringing those folks together. Because the status quo for those folks working together, it kind of sucks.
Sorry, I'm gonna edit this little section out.
Okay.
All right, so that is a super interesting kind of description, and I really like it. And I like that it's more than just the people punching the code, writing the code. It's everyone building the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear, with Haiku, is it broken up into different products? Is there a main product that you're focusing on? I'd love to hear just kind of what this looks like in practice. If we have a development team or even just a startup listening who might want to find a tool that helps with collaboration to build software products, can you dive a little deeper into what Haiku does and what some of the features are?
Sure. So first, there's not a single cut and dried answer to that question. So I'll give just a tiny bit of context to help answer it. Haiku, the company, has been around for 3.5 years now. And during that entire time, our mission has remained laser focused, exactly the same mission: revolutionize the way teams create software by unifying design and code. Now, this is a very hard problem. For decades, there have been companies growing and dying trying to solve this problem. It's a startup graveyard. It's another way to put that. And we have tenaciously hung on. Now, we've had a few different shots at this, a few different takes. We have a product out there today called Haiku Animator, which was our initial flagship approach to solving this problem. It channeled a lot of Macromedia Flash / Adobe Flash, a topic I could talk at length about. But essentially, in short, as much hate as Flash tends to get these days, the creation environment did a few things right. Namely, it allowed design, animation, and code in the same environment. And it allowed what you created in Flash to ship to every device with the same experience. So sort of based on that kernel of understanding, we sought to create a Flash without the problems of Flash, and that was Haiku Animator. We pivoted a bit since then for a whole slew of reasons. We reduced the ambition of Haiku Animator to be an animation tool. Create animations, ship to production. It allows you to create Lottie files, which is this popular open source animation library that came out of Airbnb. Haiku Animator allows you to create these animations that ship to production and thus solve this one tiny piece of the design to code gap, specifically around motion design. Now, today, sort of post Haiku Animator pivot, we have set our sights on the design system world. Now, that's a buzzword. Design systems are complicated. You ask 3 people what a design system is, you'll get at least 4 answers. And what is undebatable is that more companies are adopting design systems every day. And also that the real main purpose of a design system is to deliver a consistent brand identity efficiently. That's why companies invest in them. So anyways, long story short, we have pivoted towards design systems because that's how the world is thinking about bringing design and code together. And all of that comes down to this project, which we just launched open source last week, called Diez, which is the Spanish number 10, D-I-E-Z. That's diez.org. And it's a design language framework specifically for companies that have iOS, Android, and web code bases where they want to deliver a consistent visual identity.
So I'd love to hear when oftentimes startups, they have, obviously they build a product and then they launch it out into the world, hoping to get some attention, get some traction, and then build on top of that. I'd love to hear, because I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show. How did you think about launching Diez, and what went into that preparation, and how has it been since its launch? I'd love to kind of dive into the launch aspect of it.
Sure. It started with research. Okay, so Haiku, the company, we raised a $3 million seed round on the heels of Y Combinator, which we came out of in 2018. We didn't really announce this. We never did like a press anything about this. So we've been fairly silent or quiet about our fundraising situation. So we raised the seed round based on the inflection of interest we're getting in Haiku Animator, but realized soon after that we weren't going to be able to achieve our goals on the chassis of that product. So money in the bank, optimistic team, some revenue coming in with this product that simply wasn't going to make it to venture scale. So we stepped back and asked ourselves, with this mission to unify design and code, is there a better way to go about this? And design systems were on our radar. And so we did some more research into them. And that's through that research and talking with users was how we gained the conviction that this was the direction we needed to go. When we're going through Y Combinator, one of the first talks that we received from the YC staff was from Sam Altman, who at the time was the president of Y Combinator. And he went through this deck of just startup advice. And one of them, let's see if I can paraphrase this, was you cannot create a revolution, but you can carry the banner for a revolution. You can lead a revolution that is already taking place. And that was kind of the difference we saw in Haiku Animator was, let's recreate Flash. Let's create that revolution again, even though the world doesn't really want it, versus this design system revolution is going on and there's no clear leader. There's no one who's really taken up that banner just yet. So it was that research, that understanding of the market that led us to get into the design system world. Then through relentless conversation after conversation after conversation with prospective customers and users, we identified a particular value prop that was underserved, which was cross-platform, native, iOS, Android, and web, sort of this source of truth for design systems that still embraces native platforms instead of steamrolling them a la Flash back in the day, or a la Flutter, or a la React Native, which sort of sidesteps the native situation. So yeah, it boils down to research, talking with prospective customers, figuring out a gap in this market, and then creating a tool which fits into that gap.
Definitely. How do you, when you were going through the user interviews and talking to potential users, how were you conducting yourself, and how do you think about those user interviews? I think a lot of people listening are aspiring founders who just have an idea that they want to just push into the world. And what I've learned a decent amount of time ago, what they'll learn is that no, you gotta have some pushing, you gotta have some push and push it, but you also gotta push it into someone's arms who wants a version of that. So I'm curious, how did you think about taking feedback, listening to it, not listening to it, etc.?
Okay. So we did a few different kinds of research. One of my teammates is a formal UX researcher. That's how she describes her job, her specialty. And so she has this And she's also very type A, like does everything very organized, very by the book, which is an incredible force. I tend to be more fast and loose myself. So we did a whole slew of formal user interviews, abiding by a script, making sure not to like contaminate user feedback, video recordings, analyzed after the fact, clustered into themes. This was her style of research. And so from that, we got this corpus of wonderful data. My approach has been to sell. And I think this was one of the things drilled in by Y Combinator. But essentially, if you're not trying to sell something, you're never going to get sufficient commercial validation. You're going to get people telling you like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. And then when you put a price tag on it and drive them to close the deal, then you get the real feedback of like, well, actually, no, I don't want that, for example. And so that's been sort of my approach, even though we don't have well, now we do. In the first 6 months that we didn't yet have the thing, I was selling it, being like, all right, here's the thing, here's the value prop, here's how great it is, here's the problems it solves, and here's the price. And I think between those two directions, the sort of bottoms up empirical, careful research and structure, and the sideways in sort of, here's the thing, now buy it. We've been able to synthesize the two of those into a pretty solid thing, I think.
Definitely, yeah. That's super useful, and good to know for people that want to get on the entrepreneurial path. So let's kind of go back to what you are working on with Diez. So I will totally admit this is not my world. I'm not a designer myself. I'm on your website now. It looks beautiful, by the way. It's a great brand. But I don't understand this stuff super well. So I'm kind of curious. It might be a challenge, but I'm curious, like, to someone that doesn't understand how code design speaks to each other, asynchronous, whatever it is. Can you describe to me like what the breakthrough with Diez is, and what like kind of the killer almost killer app of it is? So then the people that do understand how this stuff works is like, oh my gosh, I got to use Diez. Can you try to explain it to me like I'm like, like an investor and is trying to learn more about it?
Yeah, definitely. So you already said the magic word when you were complimenting our designer's work on the website, which was brand. Now that's the crux of the commercial situation here is brand. Brand is this is sort of like pop business talk, but brand is often considered one of, if not your company's most valuable asset. It is reputation. It's how consumers or customers respond to your identity. So it's the sum of all experiences, good and bad. Like Matt, how do you feel about Uber?
I don't feel super I don't know. I don't feel anything. I just feel like it's a taxi app.
Okay. Do you have a favorite brand of clothing? A favorite restaurant chain?
Oh yes, I definitely have a favorite restaurant chain. It is it's a local chain, but it's called Chop Shop.
Okay. And why do you love Chop Shop?
I love Chop Shop because, well, many reasons. The biggest reason being it's healthy food that is filling, that has Wi-Fi, so I can eat, have healthy food, and do some work. Additionally, more of a sentimental reason, but I had my first date with my girlfriend there, so just in my head, I'm just like, it's kind of like that. But I took her there for a reason, right? And I also just love it. It makes me feel good about myself because I'm eating healthy, but I'm not eating a little. I'm eating a lot. It's healthy food, and I'm kind of a bigger dude, so I feel good about myself after I leave. It's also just very colorful and fun to walk into.
Okay, awesome. Amazing. So you have forged this sort of emotional connection with Chop Shop. And And we all do this all the time, like all day, with every brand that we interact with. We forge these emotional connections, good and bad and everywhere in between, and they fundamentally affect how we talk about them with our friends, talk about them on podcasts, choose to spend or not spend our money there, etc. So that all comes down to brand, comes down to reputation, comes down to that emotional bond. Now, companies that manage their brands through marketing and other branding efforts, they seek to manage those sorts of emotional connections in aggregate. So imagine, have you ever had a bad experience with a banking app?
Yes.
Okay, I pick out banking because often the apps are shoddy. Okay, and so we don't even need to put any particular bank on a pillory here, but that memory has probably stuck with you. And when you think of that bank, between shoddy app experience and who knows, maybe some overdraft fee or some time when it was just like really annoying to get on the line with customer service, every one of these dings that you've had with them stacks up as a bad experience, and in the long run really damages that emotional connection with the brand. Okay. Now, software. Let's finally get to Diez here. Software is a vehicle for that brand in much the same way that the lighting or the paint or the furniture or the menu design is a vehicle for the brand at Chop Shop, or the app is for that bank that you and I have both had bad experiences with. It's important that that software deliver that brand identity in a way that's consistent with the brand strategy. Normally that means good, good UX, delightful, etc. But it also means consistent. Coca-Cola is Coca-Cola. It has a really strong identity. You see that logo, you know exactly what it is. You see Coke Zero, you know it's part of the Coke family. That's what it comes down to, is with Diez, is these especially larger companies with big brands that they've invested a lot of money into. It's very painful and very expensive, and they do it anyways because it's worth it, to deliver a consistent visual identity wherever they ship software. So iOS apps, Android apps, web apps, mobile web apps, etc. What Diez does is it makes it radically more efficient to do that while embracing these native platforms. So particularly companies that already have native properties and are already investing a bunch of money getting that brand identity, that visual identity consistent, their hair is on fire and they just charge right into it anyways. Diez puts that fire out for them.
Got it. That was a very good explanation, and I love your kind of analogies for it's not just about software, it's brand, and everything as a brand, and brand's extremely important for software products and non-software products. Speaking of actually the bank, I'm not going to mention the bank that I thought of when you said think of a bad experience, but let me tell you, when I found a bank that was a good experience, it made it that much better because that all the other banks were so bad. And actually, I'm going to give them a shout out. Imad from Mercury. Mercury is the greatest bank I ever, I have 3 accounts on Mercury for different things I'm doing, and I will never leave another bank again, or I'll never leave that bank again.
So it's a small Silicon Valley, but Imad is one of our investors actually at Haiku.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's the man. He also is the fastest email responder I've ever met in my life. He will get back to whenever. I mean, I don't email him that often, maybe 5 times throughout the last 6 months, but he always responds within 2 hours. It's insane.
Yeah, he's a cool guy.
Yeah, definitely. Anyways, cool. So you're working on Diez. I think the way that you described it to me, I think this is pretty awesome. My co-founder Jeremy will love this. He's a huge brand guy, so I'll share this with him. I'd love to kind of dive a little bit into just higher level, above Diez and Haiku. Love to just get a peek inside of your brain and thinking, and just kind of peek inside of what are some things that you spend your time thinking about as a founder when maybe you're not working on Diez or Haiku. It could be problems in the world. It could be friends that are working on cool things. It can be startups, investments, whatever. But I always find that the founders have really interesting minds, and I'd love to hear if you kind of just what's going on in your head, and what you spend your time thinking about, and if there's a topic that kind of like your that's been ringing around.
Oh gosh. A lot of why I have dedicated my career in this startup to this problem of changing how the world creates software is because it's probably probably like my core passion in life, at least thus far. So now I'm feeling like I'm maybe just a really boring person, but that's
well something I'm in. Well, I find that there's a lot of founders that come on that are so they work on, they're so in what they're working on, that's just kind of what goes through their mind, which is awesome because it means their heads down. But I do want to dive into one thing we were talking about earlier in the show, that you said. I mentioned no code, and you said that kind of deserves like a bit of a look into. I'm curious, you're working with developers. Do you think no code is a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Does it threaten developers? This has been a hot topic on the podcast the last like 10 shows. So I'm curious, just like, what are your thoughts on it, good or bad?
So I think actually my feelings toward no code are generally skew a little negative, and I'll explain why. Primarily because it's exclusionary. It rides under the banner of like you can be a creator of software without writing code, which is cool, but it does it in a negative way, which is get rid of the code. And the problem with that is there are people who have dedicated their livelihoods to writing code. And so it's sort of polarizing, disenfranchising, threatening to tell those folks that their livelihood is going away. This also leads into the sort of vision that I see for the future of software creation, which is fundamentally collaborative, not exclusionary, but that we are creating the same things, whether or not you write code. That's the future I want. That's the future we're driving toward, is whether or not you write code, you can create software. Now, we could wax a bit philosophical maybe on what that means, why that's so important. That is a topic I do have some passion around. So software, like what is it? It's at the core, it's a language akin to human language, like the written word. And like human language, software offers unlimited expressiveness. So in the same way you can express roughly anything that you're thinking in words, you can express any sort of logic in a computer program. Now, there are a couple differences. Unlike human language, software code clamps down on ambiguity because computers don't like that. You got to be very precise. And so part of the art of expressing thoughts into the logic of code is how to do so in an entirely unambiguous way. Now, the other huge difference between human language and code software is that software doesn't only tell a story like a book does, but it dictates action. Okay, so it's not just a script; it's the combination of the script and the actors, if that makes sense. So like in combination with hardware, which is what the software runs on, the hardware itself is an inert skeleton, and the software animates it. And what it does at the end of the day, some sort of like Nikola Tesla shit, but at the end of the day, software lets you control electricity. And so with this bridge between our brains to logic to electricity, we can control anything that electricity can control. Okay. So, okay, think of it like this. It's our brain operates exactly the same way in that it sends out these little zaps of electricity. And so if you tell your finger to move, it's done so through this intricate sequence of electrical zaps. Brain sort of brokers logic, synthesizes things and says, all right, time to move the finger. Computers do roughly the same thing, but the finger in a modern computer might be millions of tiny light bulbs, which illuminate at different relative intensities such that our eyes can see the picture of a cat, for example. Or a computer in the same way tells a magnet to cause a diaphragm to vibrate in the air in such a way that our ears can hear music. So that's to try to make that controlling electricity thing a little bit more concrete. That's, again, the magic of software. Brain, our thoughts become, through software, we get augmented with this sort of digital prosthesis to do whatever we can imagine with electricity, be that controlling robot arms, driving cars, building cars, launching space shuttles into space. So that's the power that creators of software have, is that if you can imagine it, and whether you or someone else can hook up the electrical side of that, robot arms, all the engineering that goes behind that kind of stuff, if you can imagine it, you can orchestrate things beyond your own body. You can control them. And so it's really fascinating to me to imagine the future where who creates software becomes a broader, more inclusive set of people. And Haiku, we've got the next 10, 15 years on lock, bringing designers, artists, managers, all of those sorts of folks into the fold alongside developers to create software together. But then the next 50 years might get a little crazy. And so, yeah, it's again, a fascinating topic. We'd be happy to dive a bit more into that.
Yeah, you definitely have, I would say, unique, almost like a very unique way to explain something that I have a lot of software developer friends who, when I've learned to code, sometimes I've tried to learn to code, they tried to teach me, but the way you just describe it is unlike a way that I've heard before, and it paints. It's kind of interesting because it's almost like I could be wrong here, but it feels like it's like the brand of programming, the brand of coding. You were just kind of painting a slight brand of it for me, which was I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I thought. Anyways. Well, I have a couple more questions for you.
For sure.
So you have had, you've been on this journey with Haiku and Diez, and you've been kind of doing this entrepreneurship thing, and there's a lot of people that are listening who want to start a company. They want to get into YC, they want to get funded, they want to change something in the world that they think needs to be changed, but they don't know the best first step to get there. What advice would you tell them to get out there and build something like that?
I'll preface this with, there are certainly more seasoned experts on this topic than I, and any advice I'm going to give here will likely be, even subconsciously, just parroting what someone else has told me. And the YC community, for example, has a lot of popular knowledge about this kind of stuff going around. So one of those pieces of advice is start by identifying a problem that's close to your heart. A lot of founders tend to be experts in one particular area, and maybe have been really at the forefront of a particular industry, like say manufacturing robotics. If you've been at the forefront of that industry, you might know a particular problem and maybe also a particular solution that the world really needs. So kind of focus on what you know is one piece of advice. talk with others is a necessary complement to that, especially. It can be easy to fall into this sort of tunnel vision or like echo chamber of size n=1, where you think that you know what the world needs because you need it or you want it or you've seen it, but that does not make a market opportunity. So validating that by talking with others and understanding what the world wants and needs, there's probably a delta between that and your own like personal take on it. And the only way to uncover that is to talk with others, especially if you are a creative at heart. And so, for example, you're like the way you work is writing code, or the way you work is designing UIs. It can be challenging to get out there and talk with others. But I guess that's what this advice boils down to, is do it anyways. Find a way, go to meetups, be proactive with outreach, reach out cold to random customers or people in other communities, reach out in their Slack communities. There are Spectrum, GitHub, like there are people out there, and just reach out. What else? I don't know, maybe that's, unless you got other prompts for me.
That's good. It's the most valuable advice you can give, because it doesn't matter if you, like, the idea is important, but you have to get out there to the real world and because those people are going to be your investors, your customers, people you work with, your mentors. If you got to talk to people. If you don't talk to people, then you just are dreaming, and that's it. No execution behind it. So I think that's great advice. My last question for you is, this is a newer type of question that we ask here, but it's one of my favorite questions. We got a whole community of people that listen to Forward Thinking Founders, and they are always interested in helping people who come on the podcast, if they can. So I now always make it easy for them by asking every guest if there is an ask that you have for the community, or something you need help with, or something you're trying to push. How can the Forward Thinking Founders community help you at Haiku?
I'll need just a second on that.
No worries. If it helps, some people say, their answers are about hiring, some are user acquisition, some are fundraising. It could be super basic stuff, but and it could be very small. It doesn't have to be big, right? It could be something super small that someone listening can just do in a second, even if it's liking a social media post. But any ask, anything you need help with. And if you don't have anything, that's chill too, but we wanted to make the offer.
Okay. Yeah. As it relates to our mission at Haiku, revolutionizing the way that teams create software. Like if you're into that mission, as all of us are on our team, one way you could help us with that is give Diez a shot. Check it out. It's at diez.org, diez.org. If you're not a branding person, nor a UI designer, nor a UI developer, nor a product manager, loop one of those folks in. Share it with your team. Essentially, if your company or any company is investing in consistent visual identity, consistent visual design across code bases, we've put a lot of time, effort, design, and care into creating Diez to be a really stellar solution for exactly that problem. And so, yeah, that would help.
Boom. All right. You all heard it here. You know how to help, and you know how to, the website. So check it out. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I love talking to guests in the worlds that I don't spend much time in, because I get to learn a ton, even if it's slightly uncomfortable and I don't know what I'm talking about always, but you do. And that's the point of the podcast. So thank you for coming on and sharing some of your knowledge with us.
Sure, Matt, thanks so much for having me on. This has been fun.